Sick of toiling for money and want to get rich quick? Want to create a business empire or a conglomerate the shortest and quickest possible way? It's definitely possible, especially if you don't have a conscience and are willing to put the livelihoods and lives of countless people at risk. Then again, there is a price that one needs to pay for whatever they do. In Economy Assam's coverage of the scams that rocked the nation, this is scam number 3, and I will take you on a journey of a man that managed to con lakhs of people mainly across West Bengal, Assam, and Orissa. But before we go on, there is a disclaimer that we must read out.
All content submissions in this series are either based on data available on the public domain or collected from various platforms that are hypothetically relied upon. The purpose of the series is to promote by all means truth alone triumphs, or Satyameva Jayate, and not to promote occurrence of any scams. Through this series, we don't intend to either demonize or condemn or pass judgment on those who've been involved, but only to try and create awareness of how some people can find loopholes and misuse the laws of the land and use our gullibility for selfish benefit. Some of them do it just for the money, some for the power, and some just because they think that no one would notice anyway.
This scam didn't just affect the moneyed classes, but there were many underprivileged people too who got duped of their life savings. That was how ruthless the perpetrator was. Most people liken it to that of a chit fund scam. However, it was much more than that. It was actually a Ponzi scheme. I'm sure you might have guessed by now which scam we're talking about in this video. Yes, you're right. We're talking about the Sharda chit fund scam. But like I said, it wasn't just a chit fund scam. And to know why I say that, let's first understand the basic difference between a chit fund and a Ponzi scheme. A chit fund is simple. A group of people get together to collect a fixed sum of money regularly. In most cases, this happens at monthly intervals. There's no difference in the contribution amount and everyone pays equally. Once the amount is pooled, the names of the group's individuals are written on different chits of paper and deposited into a vessel or a box. One chit is drawn and the person whose name is on the chit gets the pooled in amount. This happens every month except that the person who collected the money the previous month doesn't get to put her or his name on the chit despite the fact that that individual has to pool in too. No one really knows when and how this thing started, but it was mostly practiced by homemakers in the middle to lower income category across the country. Since people of this class usually work on shoestring budgets, the primary objective was for the group to help one another out with a lump sum, just so that the money could be used to better one's life. There are many variations as to how the system worked, but if we get into all of those, this video will go on and on. The only thing that we need to keep in mind is that this was more of a self-help program and not really an investment scheme. A Ponzi scheme, on the other hand, worked almost the same way. Just that in this case it becomes more of an investment scheme with the initiator or group of initiators assuring people of returns on investment. The return rates that are assured are at times so unbelievably high that people actually take the gamble. One such person who was behind such a Ponzi scam was Sudipto Sen, who was earlier known as Shankar Aditya Sen, the chairperson of Sharda Group of Companies. It is said that as Shankar Aditya Sen, he was also linked to the Naxalite movement. He moved to Kolkata somewhere in the 90s and became involved in land development projects in South Kolkata. Around the year 2000, when he had accumulated enough land, the idea of the Ponzi scheme hit him. After all, like all businesses, Sharda too needed money to grow. Based on the property that he had accumulated, he started to issue bonds and debentures of the company. Now, what are bonds and debentures? In layman's terms, bonds are backed by the assets of the company or the issuer and are mostly safe investments. Debentures, on the other hand, are issued on the basis of the creditworthiness of the issuer. It's something like this. If the issuer has assets worth rupees 10 lakhs and has issued bonds worth rupees 5 lakhs, you know that the money can be recovered if the assets are sold. That itself makes it a safe investment since you know that your principal amount is at least secured because of those assets. However, debentures will solely depend on the revenues that the issuer generates. This depends on the issuer's creditworthiness. Now, revenues earned aren't always fixed and mostly fluctuate. Thus, it'll totally depend on how long the company has in business, the kind of business, and the revenues that it generates, making the investment more risky. As a result, bonds usually attract lower rates of return when compared to debentures. In both cases, however, it's always best to get a brief on the issuer in terms of its history and future prospects before investing. Also, issuing bonds or debentures or both by any company is regulated by the Securities and Exchange Board of India or SEBI. One of the rules is that if there are any more than 50 investors in a company, SEBI needs to be notified and the issuer needs to take prior permission from the regulator. Sudipto Sen sought no such permission. However, he started assuring investors of fixed returns on their investments, and sometimes these returns were much higher than the usual market rates of that time. In retrospect, Sudipto's motives were questionable, and the whole thing actually smelled of a scam right from the beginning. To start increasing the number of investors, Sudipto had to also build a network of agents. In fact, agents were assured commissions of almost up to 25% of collections. Now, not only did Sudipto start making a lot of money, but there were many agents who actually got filthy rich overnight. Besides the fact that the agents were assured high commissions, most began to believe that Sharda Group would actually live up to its promises. To fuel the thought process, agents got paid up front for the business that they brought in. This motivated them to gather more and more customers for the company. I'm sure most of you are beginning to get the idea of how things were working. Sudipto wanted money for his companies, issued bonds and debentures, hired agents to start selling, paid the agents a hefty commission, assured investors of high returns, and the circle just kept growing. The network had grown so huge and so wide that people started to see their neighbors, their friends, and their relatives getting rich investing in Sharda schemes. And it's only human nature to be able to keep up with the Joneses and be just like them, if not better. The worst part of it all was that this wasn't just limited to the moneyed classes, but even the middle classes and the have nots started to invest their hard earned money into the scheme. Some even went so far as to invest their life savings. Using this simple method, Sudipto managed to rake in about 4,000 crores from about 17 lakh investors. So, how did Sudipto actually manage to pull it all off? After all, it wasn't actually possible to pull off such a huge scam in so short a time. The company was located in Kolkata and the primary area of coverage was across the states of West Bengal, Assam, and Orissa. Remember, there are certain bonds that bind. The languages and cultural practices of these three states have a lot of similarities. And although the company did have a whole lot of agents on the ground to do the actual selling, there were physical limitations as to how many prospects an agent could reach. He had to expedite things. So, what else did he do? Yes, you guessed right. He started to build the company up as a brand. Now, Sardar Group of companies was the main body. There were many other companies under this main body. Some of them were Sharda Tours and Travels, Sharda Realty, Sharda Housing, Sharda Resorts. Now, most of the companies that Sharda Group was made up of was incorporated in 2006. With the kind of money that he was raking in from the Ponzi scheme, he focused on building the brand to attract more investors. And one of the best ways to do that was to earn the goodwill of the investors just so that they could attract others. He hired movie stars like Mithun Chakraborty as the group's brand ambassador. With TMC MP Kunal Ghosh, the group also diversified into the print and electronic media industry. Some of the famous brands that the group owned in the media were Tara News, Channel 10, Ajit Doinik Batori, which was an Assamese daily. It also started various Bengali publications as well as Bengali and Punjabi channels like Tara Bangla and Tara Punjabi. As a front, it also started buying loss-making units such as Global Automobiles, which was a motorcycle company that was already in a lot of debt. In fact, although Global Automobiles terminated production after the sale, it still retained the approximately 150 employees. Their job was to only tended to work when potential investors came to the plant for a visit before they loosened their purse strings. The group also bought other shell companies which were mainly used to convince potential investors and agents. In other image building exercises, it also started a fleet of ambulance services. In addition, it donated motorcycles to the Kolkata police. Now, it's common knowledge how Bengalis love their food and mishtis. There's another thing that Bengalis love a lot, and that is football. So, Sudipto did the next wise thing. That is, he invested in both of Bengal's most famous rival clubs, Mohan Bagan and East Bengal FC. In addition, he started sponsoring Durga Puja events, mostly the ones organized by politicians. This brought him closer to politicians, both from the ruling party and the opposition. There were many financial dealings that Sudipto had with various politicians. At times, he would buy out loss making ventures owned by these politicians or even bail them out of financial difficulties. This helped him acquire enough clout. Everything went well. Sudipto used the lack of financial awareness to his advantage and continued playing the game. In about 2009, SEBI started to find something suspicious and decided to ask questions. The group created a complex web of about 200 companies that made it very difficult for SEBI to investigate and pinpoint any anomalies. SEBI persisted though, and through 2010 continued its investigations. The group changed its methods by operating collective investment schemes or CIS that involved tourism packages, hotel bookings, and real estate. A CIS, in absolute layman terms, is when a group of individuals pool in and invest in a venture and the returns are divided as per the ratio of the invested amount. CIS was just another term for chit funds. Although bonds and debentures are regulated by SEBI, chit funds were not in its jurisdiction and was the responsibility of the state government. With the kind of political patronage that Sudipto had built, he thought he'd get away with all of this. In 2011, SEBI issued a warning against the group to the West Bengal government. With SEBI getting closer, the group started to sell most of its shares in various companies. The money earned was siphoned off to various locations in the world. By 2012, SEBI caught on to the group's collective investment schemes and directed it to stop all investment schemes until further notice. Sharda Group decided to challenge the directive and continued operating. This continued till the end, which is around April of 2013, when the entire operation fell apart and collapsed. A CBI inquiry had been initiated. However, there was no conclusive outcome. By December of 2012, the RBI had directed the West Bengal government to initiate suo motu action against Sharda Group's companies. By January 2013, the group's cash inflows began to diminish and were much lower than the payouts. With little or no returns, investors started to worry and many decided to begin withdrawing their invested amounts. Many investors, however, stopped receiving any form of returns. Eventually, many of these investors began to lodge police cases against the group. On April 6, 2013, Sudipto wrote a letter to the CBI confessing to his crimes. He also confessed that he had paid large sums of money to politicians. He also alleged that Kunal Ghosh had coerced him into buying many loss-making ventures and had also forced him to sell one of his TV channels below the market value. He posted the letter and fled before he could be arrested. However, he couldn't do much to evade the long arms of the law. On April 18th, an arrest warrant was issued against Sudipto and he was arrested on the 23rd of April along with key accomplices Debjani Mukherjee and Arvind Singh Chauhan. The case did not just end here. With the names of many big players from the West Bengal government still cropping up now and then, the case is still ongoing and the logical conclusion still seems elusive. In fact, in December 2020, Sudipto also wrote a letter to PM Modi and the CM of West Bengal, mentioning the names of many political leaders who had taken money from him. Now, what were the ramifications after the scam came out in the open? The West Bengal government initiated a judicial inquiry commission of 4 members. The West Bengal government also started a government-backed small savings fund to deter people into investing into Ponzi schemes. The Assam government passed a bill to protect interests of depositors in financial establishments. With continuous pressure by depositors, agents, and employees of the Sharda Group, the Assam police sealed 5 offices of the group. The Assam police also registered about 222 cases against the group. Charge sheets have been filed in 17 cases against 42 people from across 15 companies that belong to the group. Over 300 people were arrested for embezzlement. Similar actions were also conducted in the states of Orissa and Tripura, where the group was prominently active. Yes, the main perpetrator is still behind bars. But is that the end? What about the many who lost all their life savings? What about the families of those who were so distraught that they found taking their own lives as the only way out? Yes, almost about 200 people committed suicide. More than just the money, it was the livelihoods and lives of many from the low income category that was affected. Can that be justified? Or can it be rectified? We believe that it can be. All one needs to do is stay updated on economic policies and business developments on a regular basis. Look the company up before you pump in your hard earned money into it. There are some companies that fail even after putting in a whole lot of genuine effort. And then there are some like the Sharda Group whose sole intention was to dupe people irrespective of their socio-economic backgrounds. Now you know, so stay safe and invest wisely. Don't just blindly run with the herd. And of course, if you'd like to continue receiving updates on the scams that hit India and how they were carried out, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to press the bell icon too to get notified. That, my friends, isn't going to cost you any money. However, I'm sure your time will be invested wisely. This is your host Abhijit wishing you the best, as do the editors Ishanku and Rajashri, and see you soon in the next episode with scams that rocked India. Goodbye, take care.